Hello everybody, welcome back to Theje's Notebook Review. I'm your host, Joel Michael. What we're doing today is we're playing games with the HP NV13. Rude! We're playing games with the HP NV13 notebook, the little HP laptop that I just reviewed. It's an Ultrabook, but don't call it one. It's Intel Evo certified, and you don't want to hurt its feelings. It's better than an Ultrabook because it has a newer set of rules applied to it from Intel. It's got the Intel Core i5 CPU, that is the 1135G7 with Intel Iris Xe graphics. It's the latest iteration of Iris integrated graphics, and this is the i5 variant that has 80 execution units as opposed to 96 in the i7 variants of the same generation. So we're playing Rocket League with Intel Iris Xe graphics, and so far, okay. You know, this is 1366 by 768, and we're getting about 60 frames per second most of the time. Let's bump up the resolution and see if we can still get that magic 60 FPS number. We're at 1600 by 900 now. We're still getting 60 FPS. It is dropping every once in a while, though. Probably about as often as it was in 720p, so that's not half bad. Oh, there's a slight dip in frame rate, and of course when the other team scores, yeah, more effects on the screen, more textures are loading, so our frame rates go down a little bit. This is okay. I would definitely enjoy playing Rocket League at 1600 by 900 all the time. Let's turn it up to 1080p and see what it does for us. So here we are now in 1080p. We're getting almost 50 FPS, but not quite. And it is definitely not nearly as playable as it was in 1600 by 900. So yeah, definitely a lot harder to point my car in the way I want it to go. I definitely wouldn't want to play this game in 1080p. And now we are losing because my frame rate is so bad. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Let's move on to the next game. The next game in our list is now Tunic. This game was a cult classic for a hot second. I think maybe like a week. This thing got pretty good media attention, and it's still just an absolutely beautiful game and hard. So we're in 1080p right now with the lighting quality up at the maximum. Everything else is off though, like soft space, like screen space, ambient occlusion is off, and well, if it's another graphical detail level, it's off as well, except for VSync. VSync is on, it always should be on, and it should never be turned off, especially with Intel Iris Xe graphics in every single game. Reason being is that if the frame rate goes over 60 FPS with the VSync off, the frame rate just gets really choppy, even if it's reportedly over 60 FPS. It just looks so bad. It jerks up a lot. So, like I said, 1080p with just the lighting effects turned up to high, and screen space ambient occlusion, turned off. Just pretend you know what I'm saying, and we'll be okay. Very beautiful game. But if you do want it to be absolutely perfect, because it does drop frames every once in a while, just turn it down to 1600 by 900, 13.3 inch screen. Nothing wrong with that, and nobody's going to make fun of you for doing it. No, wrong button. Oh crap, now these guys are going to murderlize me, but that wasn't so bad. Hey, let's move on to the next game. We're in Forza Motorsport 7 now. I'm in one of my favorite cars to drive around, the Nürburgring, the Nordschleife, not the sissy little GP track, but the whole kit and caboodle. And I don't normally play in this view, but for you guys, I will. We're in 720p and the medium details preset. Getting 60 FPS all across the board. That's pretty awesome. I think Iris Plus was struggling to hit 60 FPS in the medium details preset. I mean, 720p and low details was running just fine on Iris Plus, but Iris Xe can back up even farther. I mean, can handle this game at medium details, no sweat, and give us great frame rates while we're doing it. Okay, I can't play in this. I can't do that view. I just can't. This is how I play racing games. People, hey, medium details looks great, but what's gonna happen if we bump it up to recommended? Well, let's find out. Now we've jumped up to medium. We're still taking a look at 60 FPS. Don't let the menu fool you, because under the medium details preset, the menu is actually going at less than 60 FPS. But when we actually play the game, well, I don't know. This might be 60 FPS, but I think Afterburner is fibbing a little bit, because I can see a little bit more skips and stutters under medium. And I don't think that MSI Afterburner is actually counting those. Maybe because they're in the decimal point of FPS, and it's just kind of, it's just not seeing it. But medium was actually a little bit smoother than this. Yeah. I'm just seeing a little bit of probably what you would consider micro stuttering. Most likely because the textures have gone up in quality, and not having dedicated VRAM is a challenge for a GPU. But overall, it's not too bad. So if I were going to play Forza Motorsport 7, I would definitely stick to this recommended graphics setting and 720p. Going up to 1080p, because you can't go in between. At least if you can, I haven't been able to figure out how. But yeah, anything higher than 720p, definitely not recommended at all, at any detail level. There's just not enough VRAM for that. Hey, let's move on to the next game. We're playing through Witcher 3 now on the HP Envy 13. And we're in 1600 by 900 with all the detail settings turned to pretty much as low as they can go. Let's get into a fight right quick. We were going at a super smooth 30 FPS, if you can call it super smooth, but now that we're in the middle of a fight in a big, huge environment, yeah, frame rates are going a little bit below 30. I say a little bit below 30, but when your frame rates are that low to begin with, and that was a big dip right there, when your frame rates are that low to begin with, even just a few FPS less really kind of hurts. And as you can, I mean, you just saw it dip like that because, hey, no VRAM. Let's go ahead and mount our horse again and just ride through the countryside, see how the frame rate holds up. I'm not going to take you guys through the town of Novigrad because, well, that's just depressing as far as frame rates are concerned. Yeah, it skips a lot and it doesn't look all that great, but you know what, it's just Novigrad. You're not doing anything important while you're wandering around through the city. Sometimes you get into some fights, but it's still playable. You know, Witcher 3 doesn't require like a huge number of FPS in order to be playable. It doesn't have to be over 24, really. I mean, it's just like Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, you know. Lower FPSs are A-okay, because reaction time, not that important. Anyway, do you really want to see higher resolutions than this? Probably not. But like I said in the review, this is a higher and a higher detail level and overall better experience than the Switch version, at least. And at games like this, on the go, you can still get decent frame rates on battery power in Witcher 3 when you're playing it on this notebook. Like, that's just a plain bare fact. And overall, you know, it's a pretty positive experience. Yes, it's much better on a bona fide gaming laptop. But for $750 and excellent battery life, an hour and 45 minutes playing Witcher 3, yeah. that's pretty cool. Let's move on to the next game. Now it's time for Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I think people still play this game. It's pretty old, but it holds up pretty well as far as the intensity of the graphics are concerned. Either that or it's just because the engine is poorly optimized, because I still think that Witcher 3 is a better looking game at like 0 details. I mean, come on. You guys couldn't do that for Shadow of the Tomb Raider? Whatever. We're getting less than 30 FPS. Of course, VSync is still on, and yes, VSync is staying on. Yes, it's bad for input lag, and it's bad for just response time in general, and frame rates, but it has to be on. It just has to be. You can't turn it off. You should not turn it off ever with Iris graphics, whatever. It doesn't matter. XE Plus Pro, don't turn it off, people. I know I can do this, so I just have to... Oh, she did. Okay, so this is 720p. It's not as low as it can go, though. What we can do is we can go even lower. Let's see if we can do that in-game. You know what? 800 by 600? Ain't half bad, although it looks like the camera is zoomed in. I think it's... I remember seeing more of Laura in 720p. Like, yeah, the camera definitely appears to be closer behind her, but the frame rate is about 30, so this is playable. I mean... And then if you're playing on battery power, you're only losing about 10% of your performance. So, I mean, I don't normally talk about playing on battery power on gaming laptops, but on this one, I think it's a viable option because you can play on battery power for, you know, an hour and 45 minutes. So, well, that's 60. Where am I? What is going on? What was that? I have no idea what happened, but hey! Yeah, so Tomb Raider, playable at the lowest of the low resolutions. Man, I remember when 800 by 600 was the bee's knees, though. Way back in the day. Probably before most of my viewers were born. Let's just move on to the next game. My friends, it is time. It is time for a little bit of there are beams underneath those canopies, I swear. We just need to get a little closer for the draw distance, the insanely short draw distance to fill it in. You know, you would think with this game, with graphics as simple as it is, it would be easier to render. No. It's not. It's not easy to render. This is the lowest of the low details, 720p. We're going to go inside his house now, which is generally the most intensive part of playing Valheim because my house is very crowded and it's just not very well organized. I just have fires going around everywhere and we're still getting actually about 30 FPS. This is about the same frame rate as we get on the outside, which is nice because it's consistent, and consistency is a good thing in life. I'll tell you what. Now that we're well rested, let's go back outside in the night time. See if we can drum up some good frame rates by staring down at the ground. Can we get to 40? Yes, barely. How about if we stare up into the sky? Hey, look, there's our friend 50. Wow, that's a record. But of course, when we actually play the game, It's not that fantastic. You know what, though? Just like I said when we were playing Witcher 3, high frame rates are not a requirement for playing Valheim. It is not a Twitch kind of game. Not even when you're fighting bones that are walking around with glowing eyes. How creepy. Die, everything. Yeah, frame rates not syncing, even when we're fighting things. Let's stop playing Valheim because I think this is enough. Let's move on to the next game. But Joel Michael, you might be asking yourself, what if I just want to play older games? Like Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, if I can remember how to play this game at all. This is 1366 by 768, and I'm going to answer your questions. This might be the highest of the high detail settings, and it's going at 60 FPS, but it is still 720p, because we're not going to be a dick about it. We're going to give ourselves a little bit of slack as far as the complexities of the resolutions are concerned. We're just wandering around in this end game environment here. We're doing 60 FPS, and as you can see in this 60 FPS game where things scroll kind of quickly, whoa, there's a lot of ghosting. Just, the ghosting is real with this one, as I said in my review. So, yeah. Does it get in your way, though? Kind of does. I mean, it's really annoying, but it doesn't really, like, prevent you from having a good time. It just, yeah, it gets in your way a little bit. Well, here we are at 1600 by 900. Everything just kind of loaded in. And, as you can see, we're getting sub 60 FPS in 1600 by 900 with all the details turned up to the maximum. So, yeah, you can probably get 60 FPS if you turn a few things down, but this game is so pretty, and it runs just fine at 1366 by 768, and on a 13.3-inch monitor. Does 1366 by 768 even look that bad? No, not really. Do we want to turn it up to 1080p? No, let's not. Holy... Oh, this is the same baddies that I ran into before. And our frame rates is going even lower. Probably because our lack of VRAM. Hey, this is Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning on the HP NV13. Let's move on to the next game. Let's play through Doom Eternal with the mouse and keyboard. This is 720p in the low details preset, and even though this is a relatively easy game to render, we're still getting sub 40 FPS on a regular basis. So this is definitely less than fantastic, but playable nonetheless. I mean, you know, 40 FPS in Doom Eternal doesn't look as good as 40 FPS on Witcher 3, mind you, but it does look pretty cool nonetheless. And if I can actually get out of this mess alive, I'm actually going to be impressed with myself quite a bit. This is what I get for trying to film games like a real man, at least in normal mode, you know, whereas, you know, anything higher than normal would just be plain masochistic. And I gotta say, I would definitely not try to play this game at any higher detail levels or resolutions for that matter. This has been Doom Eternal on the HP NV13. Hey, let's move on to the next game. Oh, take that, you ugly bastard. Might as well show you guys a little bit of Overwatch to finish out the video with. We are being our usual medic self with our controller and just, you know, kind of seeing how well it goes. This is 1600 by 900 and the low details preset, not lowest, if there is a lowest, it's definitely just low. That is, in quotation marks, low details preset. So we're going to see if we can still heal our team effectively. And it looks like we can. I wouldn't trust this to give me good frame rates if I was a sniper. or an FPS. FPS? What is a DPS kind of character? It's hard to talk and play at the same time when you actually have to concentrate on what you're doing. It is not easy at all. This isn't a half bad gameplay experience, though. It's not absolutely terrible. Like I said, I definitely wouldn't want to be DPS at this point, because I would just be plain, flat, unreliable. But as a medic, you know what? Spinning around, tapping R2 every once in a while, not half bad. I can do that. I can do this. I can keep this up. And of course, VSync is on, because how was I deaded? Oh, it was an ult. Had to have been an ult. This is cool. This is definitely how I would play Overwatch all the time. And if I wanted to do something that was a little bit more Twitch-oriented, that maybe required a mouse and keyboard to be competitive, I'd get something better than an HP NV13. Something with at least 4 gigs of dedicated VRAM, like something with a GTX 1650. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Hey. Well, anyway, this has been Playing Games with the HP NV13 here on Theje's Notebook Review. I did review this notebook. Please watch the review. It's very informative and very cool. And also in beautiful, beautiful 4K. That is available up here in the top right-hand corner. Watch it there. Anyway, just wanted to say, once again, the heck? I think that guy's hacking. That's what I wanted to say. Hey, thanks for watching, and you guys, have a good night.